Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We do apologize for any technical difficulties you may have experienced during the first attempt at broadcasting this meeting. It is very important that we share this information with you. I'm delighted on behalf of Mountain View Baptist Church and this community in District 23 of the South Carolina House to welcome our collaboration partners in sharing this information and getting this information into your hands. We encourage you to invite your friends and your family members who might be interested in this as well. This is a follow-up to a meeting that we held a year ago on February the 8th regarding the Bramlett Road manufactured gas plant and its cleanup, the effort to clean up contamination that was related to that particular property. So tonight we're happy to have DHEC representatives Myra Reese, Henry Porter, Ken Taylor, Lucas Beresford, Greg Cassidy, Keisha Long, Sean Briggs, Christy Ellenberg, and Donna Moy. From Duke Energy, we are happy to have Mike Callahan, Mike Rue, Rick Powell, Linda Hannon, and from CSX Railroad, John Dillard. We're also very thankful to have joining us tonight Representative Chandra Dillard, South Carolina House of Representatives District 23, which includes the southern side, and also Mr. Harold Mitchell, Executive Director of Regenesis Community Development Corporation. And tonight with opening remarks, welcome Harold Mitchell. Harold, thank you for joining us, and we'll put it in your hands.
Thank you, Pastor Mills, and thank you, Mountain View Baptist Church, for hosting this and allowing me there in your congregation once again in the Bramlett Road community. I want to also thank South Carolina DHEC, the team, Myra Reese and Duke Energy with Mike and John Dillard, CSX, and Representative Chandra Dillard. I want to first tell you, the Bramlett Road community, that I've been able to watch the coalition and this team since we last met at the end of 2019. During this pandemic time, it's been troubling for all of us, trying times, but the blessing in this is that we're still here and being able to move forward. But tonight, what we would like to take a look at is that, you know, for the last couple of months, we've been able to see that words matter and facts matter. And that's why tonight you're going to hear the facts from Lucas and the DHEC team to be able to look so that we can move forward on a lot of the speculations and things that you've heard in the past. Well, this team I've seen and I've viewed how they've been working together during this whole pandemic. The entire team during the entire 2020 year have been coming together on the behalf of making sure to answer all the questions that were put before this team back in 2019. So I look forward to hearing the facts and the dialogue tonight, and hope that you get a lot of the questions that you had back in 2019 answered tonight. This has been a long process, but hopefully moving forward, those questions that you have will be answered here tonight. So Pastor Mills, I'm going to turn it to you to turn it to Lucas so that you can get started.
Thanks again, Harold. We very much appreciate your participation in this discussion tonight. Speaking of questions, we want to remind you that questions are being monitored. So if you want to submit your questions in the chat on the live feed, either on YouTube or on Facebook Live, we will happily pass those questions along to the appropriate official. We also want to remind you that they are open to be contacted after this meeting. So if you have questions that you want to pose with DHEC or Duke Energy, please note their contact information. They are willing to address any questions that you have tonight and in the days after this presentation. Lucas Beresford is the manager of the State Voluntary Cleanup Program, and Lucas has a presentation for us tonight. I hope that you'll pay attention, engage with this information, and please, again, provide your questions as we will monitor them throughout tonight's meeting and try to address all of them as much as possible. Lucas, thank you for your time and your commitment, and welcome to present your presentation to us tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Mills and Mountain View Baptist Church, for facilitating this meeting tonight, and for all of those out there who have joined us via Facebook and YouTube. It was not the way we wanted to have this meeting. We very much wanted to have an in-person meeting and have it face-to-face, and we really wanted to have this about the middle of the summer. However, COVID did not allow it at the time, and it's still preventing that from happening. So hopefully when we get to our next meeting this year, we're able to do it in person and see everybody out there face to face. The CSX Bramlett Road site, manufactured gas plant site, is one that's been around in DHEC for quite a while. In our particular program, Duke entered into a voluntary cleanup contract with the State Voluntary Cleanup Program in 2016 to conduct a comprehensive investigation of the site. Now, there was a lot of assessment and prior work to that Duke had done, but there was a lot of information that was lacking. So the purpose of this investigation was to determine what media was affected, was soil, groundwater, surface water, sediments, and get a much better picture of where contamination was present at the site in order to evaluate cleanup alternatives. Now, this process takes multiple phases, because you'll find out something in the first phase that leads you to need more data. So I think we're up to about the fourth phase of this investigation since 2017. And we've tried really hard to come back to the community. And I believe this is our third time coming back since the contract came in place. And we want to continue to facilitate that in the future. But in June, Duke submitted the remedial investigation report, which is that comprehensive assessment report, to DHEC. And with that, they requested to do some additional assessment, which is still ongoing to this day. But we're going to kind of go over what was found in that investigation report and what data is going to be collected in the future, and what we'll see next. So the site itself consists of 5 parcels. This is Bramlett Road right along in here. The manufactured gas plant sits across from Legacy Charter School and is the fenced off area in here. Parcel 2 had some drainage pathways from the NGP, and you'll hear us talk about the Vaughn landfill. This is almost like a site on top of a site, because there was an unpermitted landfill that in the late 80s, early 90s was put in this area, in a wetland area here, that sits on top of the contamination that came out from the manufactured gas plant. And then as we move down to parcels 4 and 5, those are wooded wetland areas, heavily vegetated. And you can see they kind of come down toward the railroad tracks, and there's a discharge right down in here over to the Reedy River. But all of these parcels, all 5 of them, are currently owned by CSX. So to give a kind of brief history, and I know some of you've probably seen this before, but we may have some new people here. The manufactured gas plant was the predecessor to natural gas. It operated by burning coal and collecting the gas, and it was used for heating and lighting in every major city across the United States from the early 1900s until the mid to late 1950s. And at this particular plant, about 5.5 billion cubic feet of gas were produced. But with that, you're burning coal, you're creating kind of a byproduct, a coal tar material that could be used for other things. It could be used for tarring. It could be used in kind of an asphalt process, wood treating, things of that nature. So it was a byproduct that had a lot of uses, but some of it also transported by way of these drainage ditches over into parcel 3, which is the Vaughn landfill. Now, the manufactured gas plant here in the mid-50s ceased operation, And all these structures, these were the gas holders right here and some of the other process buildings around it. All of this was demolished in the 50s, and it was basically used as a trucking facility after that, starting in the 70s to the 80s. Now the landfill over on this portion came in about 30 years after the manufactured gas plant operations ceased. So what you have is some contamination from the manufactured gas plant sitting below the landfill material that was put over in this area. But all the drainage features kind of run down this way and then move down on parcel 3. So as part of the investigation, one of the big things was trying to figure out exactly where we had coal tar, what was the extent of the coal tar. And Duke installed 62 soil borings where they went down and tried to look and see, was there coal tar present in these locations. And all of the orange dots here are points where they were able to visibly see coal tar. The green ones corresponds to points where they did not see coal tar. But the yellow area here roughly shows the outline of where the coal tar is present. And you can see there's a little bit remaining at about, somewhere between 10 to 34 feet up here on the manufactured gas plant site, and some along this drainage feature here, but the majority of it sits in the upper half of the Vol landfill. And as we move out to parcels 4 and parcel 5, which kind of surround Mountain View Baptist Church, we don't see remnants of the coal tar in the samples that were collected there. So I've talked a lot about coal tar. When Duke was collecting the samples, they basically drove a metal rod probe down into the ground, and the soil was collected in these plastic sleeves that you see here. They were then cut open, and they were able to look at what the soil looked like going down to the water table. The material right here is indication of coal tar, and it kind of comes in some different fashions. As you can see, there's coal tar up in here, and then a more oily sheen in here. So this is just giving you kind of a general idea of when we say coal tar, what we're talking about and what we're looking at. A couple more pictures. This one kind of indicates a more oily material, whereas this one is a more tar material, and it can even have the appearance of like asphalt if it's weathered. So there's a lot of different forms, and understanding that helps you identify it out in the field. So this slide, there's a lot of information here, and it paints a pretty good picture, but I'll try to explain it as best we can. If we start up here on parcel 2, and we basically cut a line down through parcel 3 and down through the landfill, down through parcel 4 and down into the edge here of parcel 5, and we put that out and looked at it in kind of a 3D, looking down under the ground this way, starting at 2, moving toward 5. This kind of shows us the geology that we're looking at in the ground. And you can see there's some different types, transition zone, you get into some rock down in here. But some of the key issues is when you're looking at parcel 3, you can see there are, 8 to 10 feet of fill material and debris that sits on top. And these circles show where we have coal tar present in the boring. So there's multiple feet of fill on top of where the tar is present. And in some cases, the tar was much deeper down into the rock. But the important thing to look at here is when you're up on parcel 2, you get into maybe a little bit as you get to the edge of parcel 2. When you get on parcel 3, there's a good bit of coal tar present up under the landfill. But as you move out toward the bottom of parcel 3 and out toward parcel 4 and 5, we really don't see coal tar present there. So this was all in an effort to kind of define the location of the coal tar, look at it and understand how deep it is, how widespread it is, to help start evaluating what solutions can be put in place for a remedy to address this. And kind of going along the same lines, this is a look at the groundwater at the site. Duke's installed 69 monitoring wells to delineate the groundwater contamination. All of these dots here are indicative of groundwater well locations. And you can see there's 4 of them up here around Legacy Charter School. There's a bunch around parcel 1. There's been some put on parcel 2, a good bit on parcel 3, some on parcel 4, 5, and there's even some along the Swamp Rabbit Trail to try to determine is there contamination moving in that direction. And so the yellow areas here indicate locations where we have contamination in groundwater above a drinking water standard. And that's looking at any compound that we may have at the site. So we do have a couple compounds that we're looking at, but this is the footprint of where we have groundwater contamination. Groundwater in general flows this way toward the river. However, with all these drainage pathways and ways for water to move, you can kind of see how the contamination has fallen out the way it has. But once again, the green here shows the footprint of the Vaughan landfill, and you can see it's a little bigger than the footprint of the Vaughan landfill. But when you get down to parcel 4, there's wells there, and on parcel 5, that did not show indications of contamination. So the footprint really stands kind of right around the footprint of this landfill. And all of this is important because it will help shape and the evaluation of what options can potentially be used to clean up the site. Duke also collected samples from the Reedy River. They did not show any of the impacts from MGP operations, so we didn't see anything in there that would indicate an ongoing impact from the contamination up in here. So I thought this was a pretty good figure. When we started in 2017, this kind of showed what we were working with. There was a few points, they were scattered, but we really didn't have a great feel of the depth of contamination, the extent of contamination, but we had a few points out here. And since then to 2020, Duke's installed 69 monitoring wells for groundwater monitoring, and that's done routinely. They've put in 62 soil borings to try to identify the locations of the tar material. They've put in test pits to see if they could locate tar material that way and look at some of the landfill issues, and they collected 94 soil samples from these soil borings that they did. They've also collected 13 surface water samples and 25 sediment samples. And all of that was to try to get a better picture of the extent of contamination at the site. And based on those earlier figures, the picture's coming into a lot better light of exactly where the contamination is, how far it's gone, how deep it is, and the extent of it. So one of the questions that we often get asked when we have these meetings are there any health risks from coal tar? And for this particular site, we'd say right now, no, and this is why. In order to have a health risk or adverse health effects, you would have to have the opportunity for an exposure to a hazard. In this case, we'd be looking at the hazard as the coal tar or the contamination. At this site, at the manufactured gas plant, around 2000, they did the removal of 5,000 tons of material. So there's nothing at the surface down about 10 feet on the former MGP. When you move out to parcel 3, that's the landfill, it's got, you know, about 8 feet of fill material on top of it. And then some other areas have restricted access. So they're not really accessible. And then when we look at drinking water in the areas from public supply, water supply, and with that, there's routine testing to assure that it's safe and there are no private drinking water wells nearby. So there's not a risk from the groundwater. And the groundwater contamination that we've seen sits mostly on parcels 1, 2, and 3 that are owned by CSX and don't have any drinking water wells. And then the samples of the surface water of the Reedy River didn't show any impact. So there's not a lot of opportunity to get exposed to this contamination. However, if someone tried hard enough, I'm sure that they could find a way to get down into it. And on other sites similar to this, other MGPs across the state, we've advised people that should you come in contact with this is going to be a skin irritant, like if you got roofing tar or asphalt or something like that on your skin, wash it off with soap and water as soon as possible. And that should prevent any long-term effects. There shouldn't really be any long-term effects. If you can get it off your skin quickly, wash it real good, there may be some irritation associated with it. But at this site, you'd have to work pretty hard to get down to the coal tar. But like I said, I'm not saying it's not possible. It would just be a little more challenging than some others. So that kind of took us up through the remedial investigation report that was submitted, but there was a request to do some additional work to supplement that and look at all these drainage features, drainage pathways that we showed in one of the earlier figures, and get a lot more sediment samples in there to determine, is there any impacts in these areas? Is there any tar in here? Because the thought process is that the tar probably went from the manufactured gas plant out to the landfill area, parcel 3 area, through these drainage pathways. So Duke began collecting some samples, and they sampled one right over here in the Legacy Charter School driveway. And this sample right here had some coal tar at about 14 to 20 feet. So once they saw that, they expanded out in all directions. And what they basically found was, they saw it here, but all the ones in green around it did not show indications of coal tar. But when you come off the driveway, it started sloping down into the wetland area down in here. So there was kind of a drop off. Now there were permanent wells in place right up in here and right back here behind the school that has historically not shown any signs of contamination. But Duke had done some work in trying to set up to do this investigation where they'd taken out a beaver dam somewhere around in here. And this area typically was all covered in water. The water kind of dissipated to the point where they could get into this area. And what they found in some of these samples in here was tar material was present of anywhere between 1 to 14 feet in this area right through here. So it's a follow-up from there. They put in some temporary monitoring wells to look at the groundwater conditions in the area, and we still did not see a lot of indications of much right through here, but when we came to that point right off the driveway going into the wetland, they saw some elevated naphthalene concentrations in that area. So as kind of an interim measure, Duke put up 720 linear feet of fencing to limit access to this area. Now, probably a lot of people don't want to go down there because it is a wetland, muggy area, but this is just an added safety feature put in place until a more permanent solution of how to get that material out can be resolved. And as part of the ongoing assessment, Duke's in the process of collecting about 55 sample points along these drainage pathways to evaluate the site conditions. These pictures just kind of give you a general idea, looking at these different areas, what things look like. And you can see over on this side, there's a good bit of water in those areas, so they're a little more difficult to get samples. But the purpose is to really define any material that could be in those ditches and come up with a plan to address it in the not so distant future. And going along those lines, Duke's proposed some interim measures, best management practices, kind of down at the bottom of the parcel 3 and down here at the bottom of parcel 5, where things go out toward the Reedy River. And they're looking at 2 different types right now. There's nothing that's been decided at this moment, but there hasn't been a lot seen in the surface of these ditches so far, but the purpose would be to set up something so if we got a large rain event, a large storm event, something that could mobilize some of those sediment, there would be a way to catch it down in these areas and prevent it from going anywhere. So this is not the site, but this is a kind of an example of one of them, which would be a turbidity curtain. And it would sit on top of the water and be tied in down to the river bottom or stream bottom. And it would move up and down with the water level, but it would prevent sediments from moving past it. So it would catch them before they could go further downstream. And this is what's kind of being considered down below parcel 3. And then down toward parcel 5, where the water goes out toward the Reedy River, the thoughts were maybe looking at some kind of permeable check dam with some geosynthetic liner around it to kind of hold the rock in place. But this would help to any sediment that was moving out there would get stopped by this and not move to the Reedy River. And these are just some kind of temporary interim measures to get that Duke is evaluating to put in place to just add a few more safety features to the situation that we have right now. So that kind of brings us to the what happens next. Duke's working on doing that ditch assessment to supplement our remedial investigation report. It started last quarter, it's going into this quarter. They're also looking this first of this year into the best management practices and addressing those 2 areas. And then probably in the second quarter of this year, they'll be providing a remedial investigation addendum that will provide that data from the assessment of the drainage features at the site. And then we'll evaluate that report. We'll see, is there something in that we think we need to collect some more data? Or do we feel like from there we can move forward toward looking at potential cleanup alternatives. And once we get a chance to look at that data and kind of understand that data, we want to come back to the community again and share what we found there. We feel like this has been a really good process, and we want to continue it as long as y'all will have us coming back to provide you the information. And hopefully at that point, we'll be through this COVID scare and we'll be able to move on with face-to-face meetings and getting back out in the community. If not, we do appreciate, again, Pastor Mills providing us this opportunity to use their virtual platform to share this information. And after we've had that meeting, there's a couple things that could be happening here. So this is all kind of hypothetical at the moment, but part of it is evaluating these historic ditches. If we've got enough information, is that something that can realistically get in there earlier and conduct some removal action there while the overall cleanup of the entire site is looked at, including the former landfill area and all the parcels. So it's going to take a little time to get to the point to see where we are with that, but that is something too that will be looked at during the early part of 2021. So hopefully everybody knows about our website that we've created for this site. We have put a lot of information, basically every report that we get, every work plan that we get, we have provided there. It's a lot of technical information, but we would encourage people who are interested to go there and look at the information. If you have any questions whatsoever, our contact information is up there as well. Contact us. We'd be happy to, schedule calls, meetings, try to answer any questions that you have, because that's what we're here for. We want to help answer your questions and provide all the information we have to you. And along those lines, if you had any questions during this presentation, now would be a good time to enter them into the Facebook chat feature or into YouTube chat feature. But at this point, this concludes the presentation part, and I would like to pass it off to Representative Dillard, who would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Lucas, for giving us the facts as we know them, as what the data has yielded from the wells and the boring samplings. I too want to take this opportunity to thank Reverend Mills for his leadership and the Mountain View Baptist Church family for taking the lead in this community cleanup process. It is a community effort, and being the host. Not too long ago, you hosted a COVID testing at the church, and the community responded. And so I think it's always vitally important that the community that is affected by whatever issue it is be engaged and take the lead. And so you are doing that, and I really appreciate that. I'd also like to thank Representative Harold Mitchell, former Representative Harold Mitchell, for his expertise. He has become an expert in this area from his own work, but by going throughout the country. And so he has guided our working group to make sure that we are doing the things to be transparent, that we have good information, and he has helped us troubleshoot where we need to have a good process moving forward with the community. So thank you, Harold, for that. Also to the stakeholders of DHEC. DHEC is the state's agency who is responsible for health and safety. And they have had a very tall task of not only looking at this data, but this is the same department that's been fighting COVID, providing testing, and now issuing vaccines. And so we appreciate the expertise of DHEC, and there is much there. So thank you to that team. I'd also like to thank CSX Railroad and Duke Energy for engaging the community in this manner. They did not have to. And so I appreciate how we've all walked alongside of each other to try to come up with the facts and present the facts to you and everybody who is watching tonight with little fanfare and sensationalism. It's just the facts so that we can all work toward the next steps of what we want to see, how we want to see the community cleaned up and to be a partner in this. And we do want to vision at some point. COVID has dealt us a blow in that we can't come together physically. I appreciate Mountain View Baptist Church and especially Nate for his technological expertise in allowing us to come together. We did not want to delay any further. And so, but we do want to come back together in person and envision what this area could look like. And that will help also with the remediation of the parcels and how they are remediated. So with that, we will look forward to the next steps, but simply thank you all. And because of the beauty of technology, you know, we've always wanted to be in two places at the same time. Well, I can tell you, I'm in Columbia tonight. We are in legislative session, but this meeting allowed me to be with you tonight as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dillard, for your comments and also your leadership during this time. It's our pleasure also to welcome Mr. Mike Callahan, who is the state president of Duke Energy for South Carolina. Mike, thank you for taking time and your team, your staff to be with us tonight. Welcome to the floor for your comments.
All right. Thank you for that, Pastor Mills, and good evening, everyone. The last time I had the privilege of meeting with folks in one of our communities was actually back in February when we met at Mountain View Baptist Church. So similar to Representative Dillard's comments, I certainly hope that sooner rather than later, we'll be able to hold such a gathering again. But it's great to be here, at least virtually, with all of you this evening. And back in February, if you were at the meeting, I told you that Duke Energy's commitment to this community is this, and that's that we're not done here. And as I hope you've heard tonight, and certainly under our regulators' guidance, we're nearing the end of our investigation. And this will help lead to a solution that both protects the community and the environment. And tonight is a next step in our continuing work with DHEC and CSX and other local leaders to keep the community informed about the latest plans for this project. So with the help of all involved, we will turn this part of your community into something we can all be proud of. So I just want to close by thanking Pastor Mills again for your hospitality, thanking Representative Dillard for your leadership, and of course, Myra and her entire team for putting this event together. So I appreciate everyone's interest in tonight's meeting.
Thanks, Mike. We look forward to continuing the dialogue in the coming days and celebrate you and your team for all the great work that you're doing. And again, since your arrival in South Carolina and making Greenville home, we're glad to have you here.
It's good to be here.
I'd like to also take a moment to acknowledge Councilwoman Lillian Brock Fleming, who represents District 2 on Greenville City Council, who's also joined us on our Zoom. I want to begin with the questions. So if you have questions for our panelists tonight, please be sure to post them in the chat, either on the YouTube or on Facebook Live. We want to be able to get your voices heard. We are recording this and we'll post it later for viewing, but also want to have an opportunity to answer questions live. So the first question that we have, and we'll go back to Lucas or anyone who might be able to answer this question on the call. Are there potential health risks for persons living in the area prior to discovery and testing? And I'll just restate the question. Are there potential health risks for persons living in the area prior to discovery and testing?
Well, when it comes to health risks, there's a lot of things out there, a lot of sites out there, a lot of things that play into that. But from this site, testing goes back into the early 90s. So it's not something that's just happening today. It's been, almost 30 years that there's been some testing, some evaluation, something being done at this site. Through all of that, has really not been direct pathways for people to be exposed to this contamination because of its location. And as the pictures show, it's really the contamination that we're dealing with is mostly focused on that parcel 3 that has historically been a wetland and was turned into a landfill in the early 80s. So from a risk standpoint, knowing where the groundwater contamination and the tar contamination is are very helpful in saying that with this site, there's very low potential for risk from this site at any point during the last 30 years.
Thank you, Lucas. The next question raised is, what is the timeline for the projected cleanup of the site?
Well, I think from our standpoint at DHEC, we want to make sure we've got the full picture of where the contamination is, and that this next phase doesn't show something new that we didn't realize was there. That's always a risk when you start taking samples, is you find out something new that you've got to track down and figure out. But the hopes are that later this year, the process will start for evaluating cleanup alternatives and coming up with the cleanup alternatives. But that process is not a super fast one either, and typically can take about a year to actually come up with a remedy. So we're still probably looking somewhere between 1 to 2 years before we start really getting those final solutions out there to work with.
Thanks, Lucas. The next question is, with the knowledge of the site's contaminated history, would you opt to live here after cleanup?
I think where the community is related to the site, there's not been an impact to the community directly from the site. And personally, I would not have a problem living in the area. I actually live near another one of the sites that we've worked on is right across the road from me in my neighborhood. And I feel comfortable in the safety of my family on that site. I would hope that based on the information we've provided and is available, that people would feel safe in their community.
Thank you, Lucas. Those are all of the questions that we have in the chats. And so we will move now to welcome Myra Reese for closing remarks. Again, thank you so much to each of you for your participation and your comments. And, if there are questions post this meeting, we want you to use the email links that have been provided. Also go to the scdhec.gov/Bramlett for updated information. Myra Reese is the Director of Environmental Affairs for SCDHEC, and she has led behind the scenes with this effort, and we want to welcome Myra for your comments at this time. Thank you, Myra.
Thank you, Pastor Mills. And I just want to thank everyone for taking time from your busy schedule to be part of this conversation tonight. And especially thank Mountain View Baptist, for hosting this, and greatly appreciate the expertise that you guys have with us conducting this. Nate, you did a jam up job, as we always know you always do. We always have challenges with virtual meetings, but we continue to be able to communicate with our folks across the state. So it was important for us to link up with you tonight, so you could about the latest information that we have for the. And I do want to say, this is not just, I keep saying this is a site and it's cleanup, but this is so much more. This is, the decisions that we make have a huge impact on the health and the quality of life for you as a community. And we recognize it's important. We have to get this right for you, the community. And the only way we can do that is for you to be engaged and for you to ask questions, to give us feedback. And so we just want to encourage you to continue, whether you're here participating tonight or you follow up later and you're viewing this recording, is to reach out to us, ask questions. We're going to continue, and the pastor knows that we're committed, and Representative Dillard, to continue to be more frequent with our communications with you. So I do want to say, I was listening to some of the questions, and I know we didn't get a lot of questions, and I hope we'll get many more after folks view this recording, about would we feel comfortable after we complete this cleanup to live in this community? And I would say definitely yes, because we're going to make sure that we get it right. And that's what's so important for these types of activities. There's activities taking place across the state, whether they're called brownfield sites or cleanup, that the beauty of being able to work on these sites is to return it to the community and revitalize the community. And so we're going to make sure that we get this right. We're going to commit to you that we're going to do this. And we can't do it without leaders, community leaders, like we have here tonight, the pastor, Representative Dillard, Harold Mitchell, Councilwoman Fleming. It takes all of you as individuals to be part of this. So thank you for the community leadership. We greatly appreciate that. And I do want to say that I just want you guys to know that there are lots of things that certainly impact the health of the community. And we have had just to appreciate the opportunity that we've had to work with y'all, sharing information about the pandemic and COVID. And we're going to make sure that your community is not left behind, is not overlooked when it comes to not only having access to testing, but having access to the vaccines as well. And the pastor and I, Representative Dillard, talk about that. So thank you again for being part of this endeavor with us. I do want to say Duke Energy and CSX, y'all are key for us to be able to get to where we need to be for the community. So thank you as well. And with that, I'll turn it back to the pastor.
Thank you so much, Myra. And thanks to everyone who has taken the time to join with us tonight. We appreciate that. And I've seen John Dillard on here patiently and very quiet. John, I don't know if you wanted to have something to say, but we certainly want to acknowledge your presence and thank you for being a good neighbor in the community as far as CSX Railroad is concerned. And for all of those who are willing to live in the neighborhood post cleanup, we know a good church that you might enjoy coming to worship with, and great music, and we have a great tech team that can serve your needs if you wanted to watch from home as well. Mountain View is certainly blessed tonight to be able to facilitate this conversation and to have this level of leadership here with us. This video will be posted on Facebook and YouTube at MyMVBC on the YouTube channel. But what has happened here has been facts delivered, or the delivery of facts, as well as opportunity for us to engage in a robust conversation. These entities, DHEC, Duke Energy, CSX Railroad, are collaborative partners with our community, and you've done a fantastic job. Kudos to Nate Smith, media director here at Mountain View, for working with his team to bring this live to you. We hope that you will continue to engage beyond today. Lucas has shared with us the website, and that is www.scdhec.gov/Bramlett for updated information. If you are looking to stay connected to this process, we certainly invite you to do that. And any of these representatives have welcomed you to send them an email, ask questions, call them up, pose your questions if you have any concerns. So thanks everybody for being with us. This has been quite an endeavor, quite a number of people who have given up their time to be here with us tonight after hours. Wish I could feed you all, but that's what COVID did to us. So take good care. Thank you for being with us. And yes.
This is Donna Moy at DHEC. I'm sorry, before we get off the line, I just wanted to take a quick moment to acknowledge Councilwoman Fleming's comment that was made via the chat, and did not know if any of the listeners might like to know the answer to her question. And also to add that I'm sure that we will probably be able to add a link to our webpage for the recording once we have it, if that's convenient for people to get to.
Thank you for that, Donna. And the question coming from Councilwoman Lillian Brock Fleming was, were there any examination of the water at the school and the church, or was there any examination of the water at the school and the church? And Ken Taylor's response to that is, the water comes from the Greenville public water system, not from wells in this small area of contaminated groundwater. The public supplied water is tested continuously to ensure it meets all safety levels. So thank you, Donna. Thank you, Councilwoman Fleming, for raising that question, and Ken for the answer for that. And with that, unless there are, we say in our church, are all hearts and minds clear? All right, then. Thanks everybody for joining us. Take care. We'll see you Sunday morning, 9:30. And again at 10:45 for our worship service. Thank you. Have a good night.